Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brian White with the Sarpy County Chamber, and joining me today is Jim Masters, Focal Point Business Coach, as well as Steve Wallace, Senior Director of Customer Service North America and Director of Omaha. Steve, appreciate you taking the time to join us this afternoon and kind of share about the culture of PayPal and some of the things in that area. But first, let me introduce Jim so he can share about himself, and then we'll pass back over to you as well.
Great.
Sounds
Hey,
good.
thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. I think a lot of you folks maybe know me. I'm the facilitator for Leadership Sarpy. I've done that for a number of years, probably more years than the people that know me wish I had done it, but I've enjoyed it immensely. And Steve was one of our folks that went through Leadership Sarpy a few years ago. I'm also a business coach with Focal Point International, and have now gotten to 13 years of doing my business coaching practice. So very excited to survive 13 years, although this last month and a half has been the most unique of all my business coaching practice years. And I've enjoyed that as well, just helping clients understand what's important, what to focus on, how to make sure you're retaining your best employees, how to make sure you're helping your customers. So it's really been a critical communication time. I know Steve's going to share some really interesting things today as well with that. So thank you, Brian, for the chance to get to introduce me.
Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Steve Wallace, I lead PayPal's customer service organization for North America. Just about 1,000 people between Omaha and our Chandler, Arizona facility. I've been with the company for 18 years in a variety of different roles, but this role has been about the last year or so. In addition to that, I'm the Omaha site leader, so I'm responsible for overall employee engagement for the Omaha site, as well as our external relationship with organizations like the Sarpy County Chamber. So I'm excited to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thank you. And, Steve, last year we were involved with a Blueprint Nebraska, which was an economic development project. And one of the areas that kind of rose to the top of being one of the 4 themes was diversity and inclusion. And as mentioned earlier, was thinking about the time when we did the Modern Professional Business Tour and touring your PayPal and how you guys had really taken an emphasis and a focus on diversity and inclusion. So if you can kind of talk about diversity and inclusion and then how that helps build the culture of an organization.
Sure. Yeah, so it's something that is one of our core 4 core values at PayPal. They are innovation, collaboration, wellness, and inclusion. And inclusion is one that we are really focused a lot on. And we think that having a diverse workforce is just better for business. You're going to get more diversity of thought. You're going to get people challenging the status quo. You're going to get the very best out of people if you have a diverse workforce. And so we're very focused on that. One of the ways which we try to support that is through a number of employee relations groups or affinity groups, as we call them at PayPal. We have 6 currently. We have an organization called SERVE, which is to support our veterans and family members of veterans. We have an organization called Aliados, which supports our Latinx employees. We have Amplify, which supports our Black employees. We have Pride, which supports our LGBTQ employees and their allies. We have one that we call Opportunity, which is kind of unique in that it is an organization or group that supports employees who have family members who may have special needs and creates events and activities for those families that they may not get to do on a normal day-to-day basis. An example of that is sensory-friendly movie nights. So we rent out a movie theater and have our employees bring their families to that and just to enjoy a night out on the town and enjoy a movie that maybe at times they don't get to do because a member of their family might be a little bit more loud or a little bit more vocal during the film. And so we try to create special experiences for them. We also have our women's leadership group called Unity, which is focused on helping women develop into leadership roles and expand their leadership capacity at PayPal. And most recently, we launched a new group, or we're in the process of launching a new group called Believe, which is our interfaith group. And so we work closely with these groups to understand what the experience is like for diverse groups of people at PayPal every day, how they're experiencing PayPal maybe differently than I might be as the site leader. And through those interactions, it helps us understand how we can offer the right employee benefits, the right kind of community engagement and employee engagement events, and just makes people feel comfortable being there, bringing their full self to work every day, which I think is one of the most important things that you can think about from a diversity and inclusion perspective is you want to create an environment where people feel comfortable bringing their full self to work every day.
And no, that's great. Now, do you see a lot of collaboration between the groups? Is there a lot of intermixing of members in one group and kind of joining other groups as well?
We do, and in fact, that's something we've really placed a lot of emphasis on recently, which is as groups are thinking about hosting events or supporting local charities, how do they do that in partnership with each other? What's really great about our employee base is that we see a lot of allies. So I might not be a member of a given group, but I want to be a supporter of that group. And we see a lot of cross collaboration with our allies supporting multiple affinity groups.
And would you say that this collaboration is helping your business efficiency?
Absolutely, because when an employee feels like they are engaged and feels connected to the company and to the mission, they come in and they're actually working harder and more efficiently. And I think that's a key thing when you think about inclusion is that connection, that connectivity. And it starts for us at the highest level of our company mission, which is very clearly defined by our executive staff, which is our goal is to democratize financial services. We want to make it easier for people to manage and move money around the world. For consumers, that means giving them access to cost-effective ways to manage and move their money. And for small businesses, it's ways in which we can help them grow in an ever-increasingly complex marketplace, compete with larger e-commerce merchants, and think about how we can help them with growth through things like our PayPal working capital or other lending programs.
And I wanted to touch again, now did you say that the executive team is involved and engaged with these groups as well?
Absolutely. There's an executive sponsor for each one of our employee affinity groups, and they are, depending on who they are or where they could be based anywhere in the world, and they would have oversight over the entire organization. So there's a global lead for Aliados, a global lead for Serve, and then we actually have localized site leads for each one of those groups as well. What makes them really unique is that they really are grassroots. It doesn't have to be a senior leader in the organization that leads that group day to day. In fact, we find it's better if it's an employee that is not necessarily even in leadership. It gives people an opportunity to expand their leadership capabilities, but it really becomes more organic when it's being led by the employee.
Now, do these groups, so because you guys have multiple locations as well, so does each location have a group, or do they kind of do like virtual meetings similar to what we're doing here as well to kind of collaborate together and progress?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, there's usually a global lead for it. And so there are larger company-wide initiatives that we'll do. So as an example, during Black History Month, we had some really prominent speakers come and do large group presentations maybe in our San Jose office, but then we broadcast those across the globe to all of our other sites. More tactically on the ground every day, we actually have a lot of cross collaboration between our sites, in particular our site in Chandler, Arizona, where we have a lot of similar functions to what we have in Omaha. It's not unusual for those group members to actually join our meetings and vice versa. And we find that that actually helps with the flow of ideas. If somebody in Arizona's got a really cool idea that they're doing, they share that with Omaha and vice versa. And that allows for a little bit of continuity between the two sites, but then still leaves enough room for them to have their own identities within the local locations.
What would you say is one of the important things about building a culture?
Yeah, the culture sort of sets the standard for how you're going to do everything, right? And like I said, for us, we're very fortunate that we have a very clear mission and value system that starts at the top of the house. And we use that in all of our decision-making processes. When you think about it in terms of diversity, like we've been talking about, we have some very specific things that we try to do to ensure that we're hiring diverse candidates. So any type of position we hire in leadership, we actually require diverse candidate pools. So we have to have candidates from a bunch of different demographics be part of the interview pool. And then we also require diverse interview panels. So if I'm hiring a leader, I can't be the only one that interviews that leader. We actually ask people from different demographic groups to actually sit in on the interview panel. And that just gives us different perspective. And through that, that actually ensures that we are getting more diverse candidates in the door. And more than likely, we're going to end up hiring more diversity into our leadership team.
And, you know, one of the things that I think about is when we talk about culture, and the more that we include and recognize and accept, what you find is by being involved in these various groups, what you thought isn't what you know, and it becomes more rewarding understanding cultures and backgrounds and what the paths that people travel.
That's absolutely correct.
Oh.
Yeah,
Jim,
we find that a lot. Like I said, when we talk about it, it's really about how we understand how each employee maybe experiences PayPal differently. They bring their own unique histories, their own unique life experiences, previous work histories to the table. And when we have that open dialogue and we understand more about each other, we actually find that we can actually draw on some of that experience maybe differently than we have in the past, right? And so, when we think about the types of events that we host and the community programs that we support or the nonprofits that we support, having a better finger on the pulse of what matters to our employees, especially our diverse employees, allows us to think about how we allocate our time and our funds to different charities that have different impact in the community.
Jim, do you have a couple of things that you would like to add in?
Yeah. Steve, again, so good to see you, and thanks for sharing those insights. As you were going through the different groups that you have, I thought what you're doing there really mirrors a lot of what's going on in the world. It mirrors what's going on in society. And I think the uninformed and the unaware, some of what they might say is, well, gosh, we're getting all these splinter factions now that are taking away from what we should do as a group. I suspect you have a varying opinion off that, and you would disagree with that assessment. But can you maybe talk a little bit about that and maybe share a story where this has really helped the company propel itself forward, what you've done?
Sure. Yeah, so I think you're right. I think what's great about these groups is, it could easily be this fractured, segmented group, and they only work over here on their initiatives, and they only work on their initiatives. But we don't find that. We find, again, a lot of cross-pollination between the groups, and just some examples of what we have been able to do that I think are great things to help drive our company forward. We have a close working relationship with Offutt Air Force Base, and we attend a lot of their career fairs. We attend a program that they have called TAPS, which is a transition program. As servicemen and women are thinking about the next steps, we go and we support those events with things like resume writing. How do we help them kind of word their resume in a way that most hiring companies are going to be able to pick up on that. Not everybody understands military terminology, and so sometimes we're leaving viable candidates, at the door when we could really be bringing in highly disciplined, highly trained, highly effective people. And so we've been able to do that, and we participated in some programs called Hiring Our Heroes, which allows us to bring in veterans on a sort of internship basis. We've had a couple people go through that program this year, and through that we've actually been able to offer them full-time positions. And so what we find is that when we focus a lot on diversity and inclusion, we're actually getting more applicants for our positions, and we're actually getting more highly qualified candidates for our positions, which of course, when you bring in high quality, high talent, high experienced people, it automatically propels your business forward.
Good. That's great. Hey, let's talk a little bit about culture again. One of the books that I read some time back was called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. And one of the concepts he talks about in that book, Steve and Brian, is how a lot of people maybe have an aspirational culture. So they put it out there, and it's what they wish they could be, but it's really not what they are. I guess kind of the question I'd like you to maybe address is, how do you make sure that your culture is authentic and it's representing what you guys are trying to do? And then how do you also acclimate or get people into the culture and have them make sure they understand the culture from when they hit the ground and when they start to be an employee of yours?
Yeah, so it's a really good point, Jim, because, sometimes I think culture and values become words on the wall. They're painted everywhere, they're on signage, and it's sort of, people tout like, oh, we have this great culture. But you have to be really intentional about bringing it to life, right? It can't just be words on the wall, and your actions have to align with that. And it has to start with leadership, because employees are going to emulate and are a reflection of their leadership. And so, we're very fortunate in that we have a CEO who truly walks the talk every day. And if you look at PayPal's history and some of the decisions that we've made as a business around how we stand up and support our values, in the community and externally, I think you'll see that we live those values every day, and it starts with our CEO. A good example of that is a few years ago when the government went into shutdown. We actually immediately pivoted and said, we're going to do small interest or small business loans or loans for furloughed government workers. And that was something that we were able to do because of our product and technology and stand up very quickly to help people in a time of need. And we were very proud of the fact that we were able to do that. It was something that helped a lot of people out in the short term. And so that's an example of at the very top of our house, how decisions are made and aligned with our values. And so when employees see that at the very top of the house, it sort of permeates its way down through the organization. And so you take it down more tactically into how do you think about it in an operating environment like I work in, the call center environment. I manage a lot of teammates. And so the current environment's a great example of what we had to do and how we lived out our values for our team members there. So, obviously a financial institution the size of PayPal was deemed an essential service. And so we were open, and we have been open since this pandemic started. But we knew the right thing to do for our employees was figure out how to get them working safely from home, like a lot of companies did and are working through right now. And we were very fortunate in that we were able to do that very quickly. I think we got our entire center set up to work from home within 2 days, which is pretty amazing when you think about the number of folks that we have to be able to get them and set up and work from home. And that was a decision that we made very quickly, and and we executed on very quickly. And if we weren't living out our values and trying to emulate those internally, we wouldn't have been able to do it as quickly as we did. We had to make some quick decisions. Some things weren't perfect in the process of getting it done, but we were able to do it. And for us, it was very much a employee first type of decision, and that's something that we do regularly and aligns with our values, right? And we put our employees first, and when we do that and we do it well, they'll take care of our customers.
You touched on something that I'm sorry, Jim, to tie back into. When we talk about the pandemic, we've done a crisis management plan class. That was one of the days. And one of the big key topics is having an emergency action plan to kind of help you. And so we had an earlier interview today where they were talking about developing a pandemic plan, one that many perhaps didn't have, but you had touched on the fact that when the furlough kicked in with the government shutdowns a while back, that you guys had kind of implemented a plan in place. Do you find yourself going back to those resources?
Yeah, so I think for that type of thing, our company, when we go back to the government shutdown and what we were able to do there, I think we were obviously in a very different world, and we weren't being impacted directly like we all are now in this environment. But, I think what we try to do when we see events unfolding globally, whether that's a natural disaster, like we, had some response to some of the fires in Australia earlier this year, or flooding or hurricanes or other things, we ask ourselves, what are the services and products that we have that can help meet a need here? And then we're very fortunate in that we are a technology company and that we're able to innovate and pivot very quickly and put resources against maybe some changes we need to make internally to make some of these things happen. But we always look at it through the lens of how does our response to a given situation align with our values, right? And so where we see needs, we try to pivot very quickly and are able to use our technology to help enable some things that can help make a difference in times of need.
And my takeaway from that too is when you guys talk about building these plans and programs, it's a team. It's pulling a team together to draw on one another's strengths. Correct? Absolutely.
And that's the other thing that I think we're very fortunate is that because of our employee, loyalty and our values and how we live them out every day as a company, people are willing to do what it takes. Even if it's not your core responsibility to go do a certain task, we're willing to pick up the pieces and go do it, right? And people will raise their hand, and no one has to be voluntold to do things. It's like, okay, there's a need. We're going to figure out a way to go make it work.
That's great.
One thing I'd just like to maybe wrap up my segment on is, this is going out to a lot of folks right now who are leading their organizations. They're leading, they're making decisions. We're all in a crisis mode right now, although I think we're in an improving crisis. What do you think the most critical role or skills a leader needs to exhibit during times like this, Steve, if you were to give some advice and counsel to our other leaders listening in?
Sure. Yeah, I think, the first piece of advice, is going to be something a little probably not what you would think I would start with, which is make sure you're taking care of yourself first as a leader, or that you're allowing for time for yourself to recharge. People are looking to you as a leader in the organization during a time like this to be a little bit of, provide some stability. And you can't do that if you haven't given yourself an opportunity to process and digest and deal with the things that are happening around you. And so making sure you allow some time for self-care is really important. The second thing is, I think, is to be authentic and vulnerable when these things are unfolding, because you're not going to have all of the answers right away, and that's okay, right? But people want to know that, and it really resonates with people when you say, I don't know, right? But you have a commitment and a follow-up to make sure you come back and you close the loop. And so those are a couple of things I would say. And the final thing I would say, when you're leading through change, or you're leading through, a tough business situation, is be present, be available, and proactively check in with your team outside of your more formal channels. Your normal, team meetings or staff meetings, or your normal one-to-one check-in meetings. Those are important, and those should be focused on business and the updates in the business. But just an outreach to someone and just to say, hey, I just want to check in today and see how you're doing. Is there anything that you need? Goes a long way, especially in an environment like today where people are starting to work from home when they haven't really necessarily in the past. You've got some people that are home by themselves. They don't have spouses or significant others, and so they're home. They can't go out. And so checking in on folks and just making sure you make time outside of formal channels to do that, I think, is really critical.
Good advice. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Steve, I don't have anything else as well. Again, want to appreciate yours and PayPal's support with Leadership SARPI. I know currently Samantha Blunken is going through the class, and she's been a great resource and asset to the class. I know collectively we appreciate her being in there and your guys' commitment to allowing her professional development and supporting the program as well. So again, thank you from our side, and I'll just kind of let you kind of close up the interview if you have any final thoughts.
Well, I appreciate you guys thinking of us and for allowing the time for the conversation today. I hope it was helpful. I'm a huge fan of Leadership SARPI. As Jim mentioned, I'm a graduate of the program. I think it does an amazing job, and Jim does an amazing job of talking about leadership concepts through the classroom sessions, but the exposure and access you get to leadership throughout the community is amazing and frankly life-changing. I know it changed how I think about things a lot, and some of the things I've done since I've been in the class and how I've gotten more involved. And so I would just encourage everybody that's in the class to make the most of it, network as best you can, create relationships that will probably last a lifetime, and just try to get as much as you can out of it, because it really is a truly amazing program, and I hope that everybody's enjoying it.
Great. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.